November 26, 2025, the day one of the biggest legal threats hanging over Donald Trump simply vanished into thin air. The Georgia RICO case, the one that had 19 defendants, secret grand juries, late-night indictments, and that infamous phone call where Trump allegedly said, "Find me 11,780 votes," is officially dead. The special prosecutor filed a one-page motion to dismiss with prejudice at 4:47 p.m. yesterday. Translation, it can never be refiled. Ever. It's gone. But before you start celebrating or raging, depending on which side of the political divide you sit on, you need to hear exactly why this case collapsed, what it actually means for accountability in American elections going forward, and the part of the story that both the mainstream media and conservative outlets are deliberately ignoring. Because this isn't a story about Trump winning or losing. This is a story about what happens when the justice system collides with politics at 200 miles per hour. So buckle up. Let's rewind for a second. Back in August 2023, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis dropped what she called the most important case of my career, a 98-page RICO indictment charging Donald Trump and 18 co-defendants with attempting to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. The charges ranged from racketeering to conspiracy to making false statements. The evidence included that recorded phone call with Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, the fake elector scheme, pressure on state legislators, and Rudy Giuliani's now infamous testimony before the Georgia Senate. Legal experts on both sides said this was the most serious case Trump faced. Unlike the federal cases, Georgia had no presidential immunity issues. Unlike New York's hush money case, this was about election integrity, the heart of American democracy. The trial was supposed to start in March 2024. Then it got delayed, and delayed again, and again. And then Trump won the 2024 election, and suddenly everything got complicated. Now, let me read you the key sentence from yesterday's dismissal motion, because this is where it gets really interesting. After exhaustive review spanning 18 months, consultation with federal authorities, and reassessment of witness cooperation levels, the state has determined it cannot prove criminal intent beyond a reasonable doubt due to significant evidentiary degradation and insurmountable logistical challenges. Okay, let's translate that legal jargon into English. Evidentiary degradation means their witnesses flipped, recordings got successfully challenged in pretrial hearings, and key evidence got thrown out. Insurmountable logistical challenges is code for you can't prosecute a sitting president in state court without creating a constitutional crisis. But here's the sentence that should make your blood boil, regardless of your politics. The motion continues. Additionally, resource reallocation toward violent crime prosecutions and public safety initiatives necessitates closure of cases unlikely to result in conviction. Translation, Georgia's murder rate is still high sky, carjackings are out of control, and the DA's office needed the manpower elsewhere. So they're dropping the case that was supposed to save democracy because they're out of budget and bodies. Now, let me tell you what the one-page dismissal motion doesn't say, but what everyone in legal circles knows. First, the star witness, Ruby Freeman, the election worker who became the face of the alleged intimidation campaign, refused to cooperate further after receiving death threats so severe that the FBI had to relocate her family twice. Without her testimony, half the case evaporated. Second, several co-defendants took plea deals early on that actually helped Trump's defense. Remember Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro? Their plea agreements included statements that Trump believed he was acting on legitimate legal advice. That destroyed the criminal intent element. Third, and this is the part nobody wants to talk about, Judge Scott McAfee, who was overseeing the case, had already signaled in pretrial rulings that he was deeply skeptical of applying Georgia's RICO statute to election challenges. He threw out 3 counts before the case even got started. And fourth, the Fani Willis scandal. Remember when it came out that the special prosecutor she appointed was her former romantic partner and they'd taken vacations together funded partially by case-related income? That created an ethics nightmare that had half the charges on the verge of being thrown out for prosecutorial misconduct. So when you put all that together, this wasn't a case that got dropped because Trump intimidated anyone or because justice failed. This was a case that was bleeding out from 1,000 cuts, and the DA finally pulled the plug rather than waste another year on a guaranteed loss. President Trump's response came exactly 11 minutes after the motion was filed. Let me read you his Truth Social post. Total exoneration. The corrupt Georgia prosecutors have finally admitted what we've known all along. This was a witch hunt from day one. They wasted millions of taxpayer dollars, destroyed lives, and interfered with an election, all because they couldn't accept that I won. The American people have spoken twice now, and the deep state has lost. Again. Meanwhile, the Democratic response has been interesting. Progressive groups are calling it prosecutorial cowardice and demanding a federal civil rights investigation into why the case was dropped. Some legal analysts on the left are being more honest. Former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner said on MSNBC, "Look, I wanted this case to succeed, but having something and having the evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt are two different things. This was always going to be the hardest case to win." And here's where it gets really messy. Some Republicans are actually angry too. Not the MAGA base, they're celebrating, but establishment Republicans who wanted Trump held accountable are quietly furious that the case was brought in the first place. They're saying it was political theater that ultimately made Trump look sympathetic and strengthened his witch hunt narrative. Here's the bigger picture that should concern every American, regardless of party. This was the last major state-level criminal case against a former president for alleged election interference. Jack Smith's federal cases, already on ice because of DOJ policy against prosecuting a sitting president. The New York hush money case, sentencing delayed indefinitely and likely to result in no jail time. The classified documents case, dismissed on procedural grounds. For the first time since November 2020, Donald Trump wakes up this morning with 0 active criminal cases against him. Not one. That is a political earthquake with aftershocks we're going to feel for decades. Because here's the question nobody's asking. Does this make future election challenges easier or harder? If a presidential candidate can call a Secretary of State and pressure them to find votes, organize alternate electors, and face 0 criminal consequences, what's to stop the next candidate from trying something even more aggressive? On the flip side, does this prove that weaponizing the justice system for political purposes backfires? That bringing criminal charges you can't actually prove just makes your opponent stronger? I want you to drop your honest answer in the comments, not the partisan talking point, your actual opinion. Did justice fail here, or was this the justice system working exactly as it should by not moving forward with the case they couldn't prove? Let me know what you really think. Here's the part that's going to make some of you mad, but it needs to be said. Both sides are wrong about this case. Trump supporters claiming total exoneration are delusional. A case getting dismissed for evidentiary problems is not the same as being proven innocent. It just means the prosecution couldn't meet the insanely high bar of proving criminal intent beyond a reasonable doubt. But Trump critics claiming this is a miscarriage of justice are also wrong. You can't convict someone just because you really believe they're guilty. The evidence has to be there, the witnesses have to cooperate, the law has to support your theory of the case. And in this instance, after 18 months of investigation, millions of dollars spent, and hundreds of hours of legal wrangling, the prosecution looked at what they had and realized, we're going to lose that trial badly. So they made the strategic decision to dismiss rather than hand Trump an acquittal he could campaign on forever. One last thing. Remember, there were 18 other people charged in this case. What happens to them? The dismissal motion covers all defendants. That means Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Jeffrey Eastman, everyone walks away with no criminal liability from Georgia. Some of them still face other legal troubles. Giuliani's been disbarred and has civil judgments against him. But criminally, they're clear. And that's going to haunt Fani Willis's legacy forever. She brought the biggest case of her career, held primetime press conferences, gave speeches about defending democracy, and in the end, everyone walked.
So here's where we are. The legal storm that's followed Donald Trump since 2020 is essentially over. He's president again, he's got no active criminal cases, and his opponents just handed him one of the biggest political victories of his career. Love him or hate him, you have to admit that's one hell of a comeback story. But the bigger question remains, what does this mean for the future of American elections? What does it mean for accountability? What does it mean for the next candidate who decides the rules don't apply to them? Those are the questions we should be asking. Not, did Trump win or did the Democrats lose, but what kind of country are we becoming when the justice system can't hold anyone at the top accountable? If this video made you think differently about this story, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for daily breakdowns of the stories that actually matter. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And seriously, drop your real thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from people on both sides. Let's have an actual conversation instead of just screaming at each other. I'll see you in the next video. Stay sharp.